often we can't work out what's going on. We just have to try and guess what's happening in the forest and follow suit. And so we have to be aware that we have to start expanding this resource instead of watching it diminish before our eyes.
As rainforests diminish, public interest in growing them increases. This interest falls into three categories: small scale, usually urban, garden culture landscaping, and regeneration of forests. This video looks at the techniques used to grow rainforest plants. Nan and Hugh Nicholson have devoted many years to conserving rainforests and to researching their ecology and regeneration. We spent some time with Nan and Hugh at their Terrania Rainforest Nursery. We thank them for sharing their knowledge and expertise with us in this unique area.
One of the beauties of growing all these plants is knowing that finally a lot more people are becoming interested and knowing that they're definitely worth growing. And a lot of the mythology that grew up around rainforest plants has finally bitten the dust. And these were the myths that they were too difficult, too tall, not colourful, couldn't grow them in the sun, needed to have very, very wet conditions, couldn't grow close together, all sorts of things like that. And we've managed to debunk most of this mythology, and we now have a number of gardens right up and down Australia, from Tasmania to Cairns, showing that these gardens look fantastic in the sun. They're beautifully coloured, their foliage is fantastic, and generally they look a lot more attractive than a lot of the dryland natives that many people struggle to grow in the east coast cities, where they really don't belong.
Vegetative propagation is used extensively for certain commonly grown species, such as some of the lily-pillies, and the procedures used in such cases do not differ markedly from those used in producing more familiar plants, many of which are rainforest plants in their country of origin.
Growing rainforest plants from seed is a relatively unknown field, and most of the rainforest nurseries that are growing these plants are doing them from seed for a number of reasons. One is that where you can easily access seed and where it's reasonably easy to grow, you can grow large numbers. Another is that for many of the plants with large shoots, it's very difficult to get enough cutting material, and often in those cases the cuttings are hard to establish anyway. A third problem is that many of the cutting-grown plants have weaker root systems than the seedling-grown plants, so that's another preference. And the fourth reason is that many growers are realising now we must try to extend the gene pool as much as possible, because the rainforest resource is diminishing quite severely, so we must make sure that this gene pool stays open. The problems that are encountered in growing rainforest plants from seed accounts for the fact that most rainforest nurseries are small-scale family-run businesses. The first problem with getting seed is collectability, and that is the fact that most seeds are difficult to find and they grow in places where it's often inaccessible or actually illegal to collect, such as in national parks. Another problem is that the viability of the seeds is often erratic. It may vary from 2 days to 4 or 5 years, but usually they're in the shorter end of that scale. That is, you don't have much time to play around with the seeds before they're dead. Another problem is that viability may vary from season to season or from tree to tree. Another problem is that seed production varies annually, and massed fruiting of some plants in some years may mean that these may not fruit again for some years.
Collection by the grower is usually the only option for seed not available from the larger seed suppliers. As yet, there are few small-scale and botanically knowledgeable seed collectors who can provide adequate amounts of fresh, viable, correctly identified rainforest seed. Seed is collected mainly from rainforest remnants or isolated plants on private property or on roadsides in areas previously supporting rainforest. Example, the Northern Rivers area of New South Wales. These are the best sources as plants are low, accessible and fruit heavily in open conditions.
We can only store seedlings in the way that the forest stores seedlings, and that is by holding them, giving them quite a few stress problems in the way of nutrients and room and light, and then they'll stay there indefinitely. And we learnt that just by going into the forest and observing that when you get a very big seed production in 1 year, all the seedlings just sit there under the tree and wait maybe 20 years before they can get going again. And that occurs when a tree falls and then some light is available for those plants and they can take off. It may be that one of those plants gets into the light before the others, and then that spreads out its branches and everybody else has to stop and wait. So in the rainforest, you might get a plant that's maybe 2 or 3 metres tall, and it's 50 years old, just sitting there waiting for its next chance. So we had to apply those sorts of principles to the nursery itself.
Establishment of stock plants for rainforest nurseries is essential. For some species, this may be a long-term project. Collection of seed from birds is a significant source that can be managed. Example by providing fruit trays to attract fruit eaters, with trays below to collect regurgitated seeds and droppings. Seeds should be collected into plastic bags, not paper bags, as is usual with most Australian seeds. This prevents rapid drying out.
Most rainforest growers grow their rainforest plants from seed if possible, because where large numbers are reasonably accessible, you can grow large numbers economically and easily. Another one of the problems is that many of the plants grown from seed have large shoots which are hard to propagate from cutting. An example is this Davidsonia pruriens, where you have a large shoot like this. Not many cuttings are going to be produced from this plant, but you can produce hundreds from seed. Collection by the grower themselves of the rainforest fruit they need is really the only option. This one's Cordyline petiolaris, which commonly grows along roadsides where we collect much of our seed. Another plant that's relatively easy to collect in gardens is Calicarpa pedunculata. I always collect into plastic bags. Paper bags are too dry, and the seed may be dead even by the time you get it home. Rainforest seed needs to be processed as soon as possible after collection. This usually means peeling, as in the case with this Dirobi fruit, which is one of the lily pillies. And after peeling, the seed has to be dropped into water to soak it. Soaking is normally done for 24 hours because this kills any seed predators that might be in there, and as well as that, it rehydrates any seeds that may have dried out and still have some life in them. Often you can't tell this until you've done the rehydrating process. Most rainforest plants have to be processed as soon as they're collected, usually within hours. This one's a brush cherry. It needs to be peeled within 24 hours of collection, and then usually when the seed's been taken out of the flesh, it's soaked in water. This kills any predators, and also it rehydrates any seed that may have dried out considerably but still have some life left in it. Often you won't know if the life's there until you've soaked the thing in water and found that it swells again. Many rainforest species need to have the flesh removed. In some cases, these contain chemical compounds that would actually inhibit the germination of the seeds if they are left on. This is normally done by birds in the rainforest, but in this case it has to be done by the propagator. This is a lily pilly, one of the ones that needs the flesh removed. And this is a cordyline, which has a bright flesh with little black seeds. In most cases, the removal of this flesh is a laborious and very time-consuming process. Many of these seeds have to be dried so that their capsules open. These plants are left in the sun, and you can see in this case it's a euodia, that the tiny little black seeds are revealed as the capsules begin to open. The trick is to find which seeds are going to open in the sun and which are going to close up even harder and go rigid, so it's impossible to get the seeds out. A lot of this is just learnt by trial and error. Some species, such as this thornbark, have tiny, fine, irritating spines, and you can see these drop out onto the propagator if they're not careful. The only way to deal with this is just to pick it up, put your fingers into the spines and dig out the seeds. It's a painful process, and I've found no way to get around it yet. Many of the rainforest plants have to be sieved and washed so they're entirely clean when they're planted. This is rosewood seed that has a fleshy arrow, and it's best if this arrow is removed, usually by pushing through a sieve. This is rosewood seed which has a fleshy arrow. This arrow may rot and cause infection on the seed if it's not removed. Many of the harder rainforest seeds need to be scarified to initiate germination. This is when they have a very hard seed coat, such as in this cassia. And heat treatment is rarely used in preparation of rainforest seeds because ecologically there's no connection between fire and germination for rainforests, unlike many of the other Australian species. So in this case, with cassia, it has to be laboriously cut one by one, usually with nail clippers. Firing usually is too risky and the seeds may die. Some rainforest plants, like this hard quandong, have a very hard inner stone and it's very difficult to penetrate this stone or crack it. So in that case, the flesh is removed, usually by rotting, and then the seed just left in the propagating medium, sometimes for up to 7 years until it chooses to germinate. This is a particularly hard case. This is the white beech, which has a big blue fruit when it falls from the tree, and inside the fruit is a little hard seed, which looks as if it's been eaten by rats. It's severely excavated on one side. Most growers, including me, have tried to grow this in the past, decided that the seed was no good and thrown it out. But in fact, in this case, there are 4 little bulges on the other side of the seed. These contain the actual kernels themselves. If the plant is left in the sun, cracks appear around these little trapdoors, and then the seed can emerge after it's been planted. If this process is not done, it takes about 4 or 5 years to germinate. If the process is done, it takes about 4 weeks. Another one of the very valuable but very difficult to propagate rainforest plants is blue quandong. This has a beautiful blue fruit and a hard inner stone that's very difficult to germinate under 5 to 7 years. But if the right process is done, you can germinate it in 3 to 4 weeks. The trick is to penetrate the stone with a bash from a hammer. If it's done correctly, it falls apart and shows firm inner seeds. These germinate very quickly once they're planted. Also, the rest of this capsule will imbibe water and germinate as well. So 3 to 5 seeds will come out of this one stone. Seeds with hard inner surfaces are very difficult to manage. These have to be cut away in another time-consuming process. This one's called tulip satinwood. It's a very valuable rainforest timber tree, so it's worth growing, but the amount of time consumed in producing it is extraordinary. This has to be cut so the inner kernel just shows through the hard case.
Germination times vary from a few days for peanut tree to 10 years for crabapple. Most pre-sowing treatment is an attempt to hasten germination times. For long-term seeds, dense sowing, up to 3,000 seeds in a standard prop tray for some species, and oversowing saves space.
For many rainforest plants, such as this rainforest lomandra, very dense sowing can be done. This saves a lot of space in the nursery, particularly if the plant is expected to take a long time to germinate. This tray has already had 1,000 plants potted out of it, and as you can see, very little of the tray is actually gone. So this would hold 3,000 to 4,000 seeds, or plants now. This is an exceptional sowing rate and not normally done, but you can get away with it with a lot of rainforest plants. It takes trial and error to work out which ones you can do it with and which ones may damp off.
Management of germinating plants, example housing, ventilation, watering, control of fungus and seed predators, is similar to that in production of other nursery species. However, Australian rainforest plants' combination of extraordinary diversity, short viability and irregular seed production requires unorthodox methods. The solution is seedling storage instead of seed storage.
To store seedlings, these plants are grown in sand or gravel or some other inert, nutrient-free material, especially free-draining material. And when they run out of nutrients in their cotyledons, they cease growth. As you can see from this little plant, rainforest plants can stop growth and exist indefinitely without root deformation or damping off or any of the many other problems that other plants get when their growth is inhibited. These plants can live for 4 to 5, even up to 10 years when necessary, living on minimal reserves and with minimal fungal or any other predator control. For some reason that we don't understand, they have very few disease problems when they're in this state of suspended animation. When plants are required for growing on, it's very easy to break their dormancy and get them moving again if slow-release fertilisers are added, preferably some weeks prior to potting up. It can be seen that with these native tamarins, where the fertiliser was added a couple of weeks ago, they're starting to move quite actively and the tissue has greened up considerably. These could be potted straight away. Whereas a plant like this tuckaroo next door, if it was potted now, it would take some weeks to recover and start to grow actively again. Some seeds which have very, very fine seed and normally germinate only on tree fern trunks may need some fibrous addition to the mix, not just the coarse sand. This particular little bunch of plants is actually 4 years old. It was sown 4 years ago, but the others that were propagated at the same time have been grown large and sold long ago. These ones will wait for 5 or 10 years more if need be. Predator control is a particular problem for rainforest plants because many of them are eaten by native mammals. And in this case we have to put trays over the top of the plant, such as in this one, so that the native rats can't run away with the seed. When the rainforest plants are potted up, any with crooked stems are quite severely pruned to make sure that the plant will be straight when it's finally sold. And this follows what happens in the rainforest itself when the taproots of the trees actually die off as they mature. So there's no problem with being quite ruthless with the root system to ensure that the tree itself is going to be straight. The growing on conditions for these plants are basically the same as any other acid-loving ornamental, such as azaleas. They're very easy to grow in nursery situations. The trick has been the propagation and the getting of the plants to the stage where you can pot them on. Once they come out of the nursery and are planted, they're extremely hardy and do very well in full sun conditions and full frost for some of them as well. This gets over a lot of the prejudices that many people used to have about the growth of rainforest trees, and they're turning out to be a lot more adaptable than everybody believed.
Public interest in rainforest plants is growing steadily, but is not being matched by enough research either into the species and forms most suitable or the best techniques for producing them. With only a limited amount of accessible seed available at present, it is important that losses due to ignorance of the correct seed treatment should be avoided. Very little information has been written about rainforest seedling production, although it is likely that there is a great deal of empirical knowledge on the subject. Many of the problems could be overcome with more dissemination of propagation techniques, an efficient seed swapping network, and more serious research into growing of rainforest plants, particularly for much needed large-scale reforestation projects.
It's quite ironic that it is actually difficult to get plants from rainforests. One of the accusations against rainforest growers has been that they rip their plants off from the rainforest itself. And in fact it's extremely difficult to do that because digging up plants, apart from being illegal, is quite difficult to do. And collecting seed out of tall rainforest is also difficult because it's too tall, and by the time it falls to the ground it's usually infested with insects. And by far the best plants to collect from are those on roadsides or in farms or in gardens, where they're quite low, you can drive the car underneath or use a ladder, and because they're in the open, the fruits produce much more prolifically and they're much easier to get and in good quantities and qualities. So basically collecting from rainforest is just out.